Hello there, you're watching World News Program with me, Mariam Zian, to the headlines. Dozens of martyrs and wounded in horrific Zionist massacres as the Israeli occupation continues its assaults across the Gaza Strip. The resistance targets Israeli soldiers and vehicles in separate operations in central and northern Gaza. And responding to confessions by Israeli soldiers, Hamas says the systematic killing of starving civilians is a blatant war crime. Iran's foreign minister stresses that the IAEA Director General's insistence on visiting Iranian nuclear sites is meaningless and driven by ill intent. Tehran denies holding talks with Washington. Meanwhile, Trump says he would consider bombing Iran again if it resumes uranium enrichment. And in a new blow to Morocco, the UK abandons its largest joint green energy project due to high risks. Normalization with the Zionist entity increases the royal palace's troubles, and the UN calls on Morocco to end its crackdown on human rights defenders in Western Sahara. Hello and welcome back to your nightly news. First, the Zionist drones carried out airstrikes across different parts of Gaza, resulting in the deaths of 47 Palestinians and injuring several others, according to medical sources at Nasser Medical Complex. These attacks coincided with intense artillery shelling targeting the entire Gaza Strip. Saraya al-Quds, the military wing of the Islamic Jihad movement, released footage showing its fighters detonating an Israeli military vehicle that had entered the vicinity of Riyadh al-Salihin Mosque east of Jabalia refugee camp. The Abu Ali Mustafa brigades, in coordination with the Nasser Salah ad-Din brigades, released video footage of what they said was the targeting of the Israeli Nahal Oz site east of Gaza City with two 107mm rockets in response to the ongoing Zionist crimes in the Gaza Strip. And Hamas stated that a report published by Hebrew media featuring testimonies from soldiers claiming they were ordered to shoot Palestinians near aid centers confirms the genocidal actions of the Israeli occupation. In an official statement, Hamas said the targeting of starving civilians in Gaza is further proof of the occupation's brutality.
The systematic killing of starving civilians in the Gaza Strip is a blatant crime and further evidence of the brutality of the occupation and its fascist leaders led by war criminal Benjamin Netanyahu.
The Palestinian government media office revealed the discovery of narcotic pills inside flour sacks sent from the so-called death trap crossings, calling it a heinous crime targeting the health of civilians and the fabric of society. In an official statement, the media office expressed deep concern and condemnation over the documented discovery, placing full responsibility on the Israeli occupation. The United Nations Security Council is holding a closed session to discuss the worsening humanitarian crisis in Gaza at the request of Algeria. During the session, the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs is expected to brief Council members. Algeria's request comes amid continued Israeli attacks on unarmed civilians and the ongoing blockade preventing vital humanitarian aid from reaching Gaza. And Slovenia has announced it will coordinate with like-minded countries to act if the European Union fails to take concrete steps in the next 2 weeks to address the worsening humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Speaking on the sidelines of the EU summit in Brussels, Slovenian Prime Minister Robert Golob stressed the need to go beyond symbolic solidarity with Palestine. Moving on to Iran, the Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said Friday that Tehran may reject any request from the head of the International Atomic Energy Agency to visit Iranian nuclear sites, calling such insistence meaningless and ill-intentioned. In a social media post, Araghchi said the Iranian parliament had voted to suspend cooperation with the IAEA until the safety and security of Iran's nuclear facilities are ensured. The IAEA Director General Rafael Grossi said continued verification activities by inspectors in Iran are essential, as required under agreements between the agency and Tehran. In a statement issued Thursday, the agency responded to reports that Iran's parliament may push to suspend cooperation, clarifying that it had not received any formal notification from Tehran regarding such a law. And Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said Iran has not yet decided to resume nuclear talks with the U.S., contradicting U.S. President Donald Trump, who said that negotiations were imminent. In a press statement, he said that Iran was still evaluating whether such negotiations would serve its national interest after 5 previous rounds.
No agreement has been made to resume negotiations now. I am stating clearly that no agreement has been made. No promise has been made. Nor have we talked about the restarting of negotiations. But the fact that we are examining among ourselves what is in the interest of the Iranian people is another discussion. So far, there has been no agreement, no subject for negotiation.
And British Foreign Secretary David Lammy held a phone call with Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi on Thursday evening to discuss the latest Middle East developments. According to Iranian media, the conversation focused on the aftermath of the Israeli-American strikes on Iran and included an exchange of views on proposals for a ceasefire. And Iran's permanent representative to the UN, Amir Saeed Ravani, said Iran is open to exporting its stockpile of enriched uranium provided a new agreement is reached. In an interview with US-based outlet Al Monitor, Ravani said Iran would consider abandoning enrichment on its own territory in favor of regional nuclear framework. However, he made it clear that Iran intends to maintain its domestic nuclear energy production capabilities while remaining open to regional cooperation for peaceful purposes. US President Donald Trump threatened on Friday to launch another strike against Iran if it resumes uranium enrichment. Speaking to reporters at the White House, Trump expressed doubt that Iran would continue pursuing a nuclear weapon following recent U.S. airstrikes on Iranian nuclear sites. He said Tehran is now seeking a meeting with Washington and insisted that the IAEA, or another trusted body, must be granted full inspection rights in Iran. And officials behind the UK-Morocco electricity interconnection project expressed disappointment after the British government announced it would not proceed with the initiative, citing misalignment with its domestic energy strategy. Energy Minister Michael Shanks said the project intended to supply up to 7 million UK homes with solar and wind power from the occupied Saharan territories would not go ahead. The government aiming to significantly decarbonize its electricity sector by 2030 stressed that local projects provide greater economic benefits. The UK has dealt a major blow to the Makhzen's expansionist ambitions, cancelling a $34 billion energy project in occupied Western Sahara, seen as a key pillar of Morocco's strategy to legitimize its occupation. Marwa Blauer has the report.
In a move that delivered a severe blow to the Makhzen's expansionist ambitions in Western Sahara, the United Kingdom has cancelled what was said to be the largest foreign investment project in the occupied territories, a $34 billion green energy deal that had been championed as a flagship initiative. With no prior warning, the British government pulled out the project, long promoted by the Makhzen across economic forums and media platforms, presenting it as a pillar of Morocco's green energy drive and a strategic lifeline for consolidating control over the occupied region. Though officially framed as a shift toward supporting domestic energy projects, analysts point to the legal sensitivities around Western Sahara's UN-listed status as a decisive factor. This is just the latest setback. The decision follows a ruling by France's State Council requiring all goods from the occupied territory to be labeled as originating from Western Sahara, a legal blow that caught the Makhzen and its French allies off guard, including President Emmanuel Macron. Meanwhile, the Polisario Front's diplomatic efforts are gaining traction, from UN decolonization committees to the European Court of Justice. International bodies have increasingly affirmed the Sahrawi people's right to self-determination and full control over their natural resources. The British withdrawal adds to mounting international pushback against the Makhzen's attempts to cloak occupation in the language of development. With economic partnerships now under scrutiny and legal rulings piling up, Rabat's strategy of using investment to normalize its presence in Western Sahara faces growing isolation and diminishing returns.
And a group of Moroccan researchers, academics, and students have announced their withdrawal from an upcoming international forum scheduled to take place in Rabat from July 6 to 11 in protest against the participation of Zionist counterparts representing institutions accused of complicity in war crimes in Gaza. The group condemned what they described as an attempt by the Moroccan regime to normalize through academia.
At a time when the Zionist entity is waging a brutal genocidal war against our brothers in Gaza, Moroccan sociologists cannot whitewash this entity's crimes or allow themselves to be stained with such disgrace. I call on professors and researchers in the field of sociology to pressure the International Sociological Association to cancel the participation of the Zionist delegation and to boycott the forum. If that participation is insisted upon, they must clearly express their total rejection of academic normalization in all its forms and from any party.
The United Nations Special Rapporteur on Human Rights Defenders Mary Lalor has urged Moroccan authorities to immediately end their crackdown on human rights defenders in occupied Western Sahara. In a post on her official social media page, Lalor said she had received credible reports that Moroccan police assaulted Sahrawi activists Sidi Mohammed Adash and Mustafa Dah after their participation in commemorations marking the 55th anniversary of the Zemla uprising.
I have received disturbing information regarding acts of violence by Moroccan police against Sahrawi human rights defenders Sidi Mohammed Dadash and Mustafa Dah, following an annual commemorative event on June 19. Moroccan authorities must put an end to the repression of human rights defenders in Western Sahara.
The Democratic Republic of the Congo and Rwanda signed a U.S.-brokered peace agreement on Friday in Washington. Attended by U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and the foreign ministers of both countries, the deal includes commitments to respect territorial integrity, halt military actions, disarm non-governmental armed groups with conditions for reintegration, and establish a joint security coordination mechanism. Both parties also agreed to facilitate the return of refugees and displaced persons, enable humanitarian aid access, and develop a framework for regional economic integration. Algeria welcomed the signing of a peace agreement between the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Rwanda held Friday in Washington. In a statement, the Algerian Foreign Ministry described the deal as a crucial step toward restoring lasting peace and security in a region long plagued by violence and tragic divisions between neighboring peoples. The Algerian Foreign Ministry reaffirmed its support for the implementation of the peace agreement and expressed hope that this momentum would extend to other troubled regions across Africa.
Algeria reaffirms its full support for the effective implementation of this agreement, expressing its hope that this constructive momentum will extend to troubled regions across Africa. This would contribute to laying the foundations for a secure and stable continent, one that channels its immense potential exclusively towards achieving comprehensive development and sustainable prosperity. Algeria reaffirms its full support for the effective implementation of this agreement, expressing its hope that this constructive momentum will extend to troubled regions across Africa. This would contribute to laying the foundations for a secure and stable continent, one that channels its immense potential exclusively towards achieving comprehensive development and sustainable prosperity.
Secretary of State for African Affairs Selma Mansouri also held talks with Mozambican Minister of Foreign Affairs and Cooperation Veronica Macamo. The discussions focus on strengthening the partnership between Algeria and Mozambique and expanding cooperation in areas of mutual interest. And on behalf of President Mr. Abdelnajid Tebboune, Secretary of State for African Affairs Selma Mansouri took part in Mozambique's 50th Independence Day celebrations. According to the Algerian Foreign Ministry, Mansouri was received by Mozambican President Daniel Chapo, to whom she conveyed President Tebboune's warm wishes for continued progress and prosperity. Both sides reaffirmed the deep historical ties between their countries and explored ways to enhance bilateral cooperation across broader sectors. And Sonatrach CEO Rashid Hashishi praised the success of the 12th edition of the company's Scientific and Technical Days, citing the high quality of contributions and participation. In his closing remarks, Hashishi emphasized the convergence of science and energy industry and called the event a foundation for strategic partnerships toward a sustainable energy future.
What we shared in terms of expertise and intelligence reflects the depth of insight that characterized the Scientific and Technical Days organized by Sonatrach. These days brought together a significant number of experts and scholars. The key outcome was the strengthening of the bridge connecting the academic community with the energy industry. Nearly a considerable percentage of the contributions came from academics and researchers from Algeria and other countries. The success of the Scientific and Technical Days is not merely a success for Sonatrach, but a shared success for all participants in this event.
The Special Rapporteur or representative of the UN Secretary General and head of the United Nations Support Mission in Libya, Hana Tete, reaffirmed her commitment to working with all Libyan parties to end the political stalemate and achieve peace and stability in the country. In a message of congratulations on the occasion of the Islamic New Year, Tete expressed her hope that Libyans will succeed this year in achieving lasting peace, unity, and stability in Libya. As the new Hijri year begins, I extend my heartfelt greetings and best wishes to all Libyans. I hope this year brings new opportunities to achieve lasting peace, unity, and stability. This occasion is a reminder of our continued commitment to work alongside all parties to help move the country out of its current stalemate toward a more peaceful, stable, and prosperous future. The European Council announced the extension of the EU border assistance mission in Libya for an additional 2 years until June 30, 2027. The mission has been allocated nearly $52 million for this period and aims to enhance Libya's capacity to manage its borders, combat cross-border crime, including human trafficking and migrant smuggling, and to fight terrorism. Russian President Vladimir Putin said Friday that Russia is ready to resume peace talks with Ukraine, though no date or location has been set. Speaking in Minsk, Putin acknowledged significant differences between the sides' previous proposals, but expressed hope that continued dialogue could help bridge the gap. He also noted that negotiators from both countries remain in contact.
We have agreed to hold the third round of negotiations after the conclusion of this phase. Overall, we are ready for that. We just need to agree on the time and place. We are prepared to hold such meeting in Istanbul. However, the exact timing is up to the heads of the negotiating teams from both sides. And by the way, I'm in regular practical contact.
And Putin also stated that relations between Moscow and Washington are beginning to improve, adding that U.S. President Donald Trump is genuinely seeking to resolve the Ukraine conflict. He said a meeting with Trump is possible and highlighted that American businesses are showing interest in returning to the Russian market.
In general, and thanks to President Trump, relations between Russia and the United States have started to improve in some areas. We haven't resolved all the issues related to diplomatic relations, but the first steps have been taken, and we are moving forward.
And Beijing expressed hope to work with the U.S. to implement the important consensus reached during the phone call between the two heads of states.
A spokesperson for the Chinese Ministry of Commerce had already made relevant comments on this matter. I would like to stress that we hope that the United States side will work with China to implement the important consensus reached during the phone call between the two heads of state. We should leverage the China-US economic and trade consultation mechanism, enhance mutual understanding through communication and dialogue, reduce misunderstandings, strengthen cooperation, and promote the stable, healthy, and sustainable development of China-US relations.
And lastly, the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said the EU is prepared for all possible outcomes in trade negotiations with the US, including a breakdown in talks. During a press conference, she said her team is currently assessing the latest American proposal on tariffs.
You can't let everything slide, but getting into bidding war that leads to a trade war that makes both sides of the Atlantic poorer and is simply foolish. So I actually support the approach taken so far by the Commission President, who's always remained very calm, does not allow herself to be provoked, and simply negotiates to reach an agreement. If it turns out that we end up with unilateral and unreasonable tariffs, then we must take reasonable, proportionate, and very targeted countermeasures.
Ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of this news bulletin. Thank you for your kind attention and see you next week.